But now I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. George Westerman, Principal Research Scientist at the MIT Sloan School of Management. Dr. Westerman is a world-recognized thought leader in leading transformation and competitive advantage through technological innovation. He works at the really exciting intersection of executive leadership and digital innovation to provide continuous valuable insights to leaders in all industries. George, welcome.
Thanks, Todd. It's really great to be here, and it's especially great because at home, we got 5 inches of snow yesterday, and there was no snow on the ground here, so that's a good thing. So, yeah, I teach in the management school, and so what I focus on, you said technology, innovation, leadership, I try to take technologies and make them, to demystify them, to help leaders understand what's happening there, and then really think about how do you design your organization and how do you lead transformation. So I did some of the earliest research on digital transformation 15 years ago. To tell you how long ago that was, nobody used the word digital transformation back then, right? And so I wrote some book on that. I had done work with IT organizations before that. I've done work in skills and careers, and now, of course, AI, all of those things come together. AI is affecting all of that. And so what I want to do today is talk to you a little bit about how do you think about generative AI and how do you work that in your strategy. Now, Eric has been doing AI for almost as long as I've been alive, right? And I want to try to tell you about AI from a management standpoint. And that means I will try to make it crystal clear for you in trying to make decisions in your organization. But it also means that if Eric and I disagree, he's correct, okay? So that's where we want to go. My job is to be as clear as possible, help you figure out the questions you can ask, the instincts to develop as you are making decisions, because all of you probably are having to make decisions with AI. How can I help you understand that a little bit better? Or if I could say it a different way, how can it make it a little bit less scary and make you feel more competent in dealing with this stuff? So you ready to go? 3 pieces here. Number 1 is what is AI? Now, Eric already talked about what is AI. I'm going to give you my version of it, okay? And think about these elements of the different kinds of AI and how to think about it. Number 2 is Gen AI, because that's really where we're spending a lot of time now, a lot of attention on ChatGPT and Gemini and Midjourney and all these Sora and all these others. How do you think about making that work in your organization? Because it's tremendously powerful, but also very risky. And how do you think about that? And then the last is, what does that mean? How are companies innovating with this right now? So first, what is AI? And like I said, it's a little bit scary after having followed an AI professor. But like I said, it's mostly correct and hopefully very clear when we talk about it. What is AI? Well, the thing about what is AI is it's really hard, right? The definitions Eric gave were from 2003. Now, Google does not track Google Trends back in 2003. They started in 2004. And look what generative AI. Nobody was talking about it because it didn't exist back then, right? But then deep learning, he talked about that, and you can see how that came on 10 years ago or something like that. That was really cool. We had a thing called the Work of the Future Initiative. And the question there was, with deep learning doing what it is doing, what jobs will be left after the robots eat the jobs, okay? And we found out actually they don't eat the jobs, they eat pieces of the jobs, right? And also there's a lot of extra effort that goes in. It's not just the technology. But that was the scariest, most interesting AI, and now what do we call that? We call that traditional AI, right? That's how fast these things move. Go back a little bit farther. This is machine learning. And you can see, you know, why is it bigger? Well, it's actually a superset of these other two. And then artificial intelligence. And the interesting thing about this, you see, artificial intelligence was more common, and now it's less common. Because artificial intelligence back then was a different kind of thing than it is now, just like Eric was talking about, right? So with these elements, how do you make sense out of this mess when it keeps moving so quickly? I'm going to really first give you my important law that if you remember nothing else, remember this. You know Moore's law, right? You know Moore's law? And the exponential, right? These things keep growing at an exponential rate, okay? This is Westerman's law. Westerman's law is different. Technology changes quickly. Organizations change much more slowly. I know this to be true. I should not have to say this is true, but I know it to be true, and you know it to be true. But our technology people often forget this. And your technology vendors often forget this. The hard part is not adopting the technology, it's changing the way you do business. It's not the digital, it's the transformation is the hard part. Okay? And so what does that mean? Technology is not the problem, transformation is. So it's not really a technical problem, it's also very much a leadership problem. We need to get both of those things in there, right? And so, for example, in talking about AI, we'll talk to a lot of executives, but here's two that we can quote, right? Matthew Evans, who worked on AI for the manufacturing process at Airbus, he says, strictly speaking, we don't invest in AI or natural language processing or image. We are always investing in a business problem. Or if we go on to the Home Depot, Fahim Siddiqui, another thing I do is I run the MIT Sloan CIO Leadership Award every year, and Fahim was one of our finalists last year. And Home Depot is a home goods store, right? If you need hardware or saws or wood or anything, you go to Home Depot. I am renovating a house right now, so I spend a lot of time in Home Depot. And Fahim and his team have created a really good experience for a really, really complicated store. He says we should always be looking for extraordinary experiences. We want to bring joy to the user. We want to delight. The technology, that's secondary. And once again, we forget that all the time, but we can't forget that because technology provides zero value to your company. What you do with the technology is what creates that value. Okay? How you change your business or your products to make it work better. So, what's the first thing from a management side? What's the first thing you need to know about AI? Artificial intelligence is not intelligent. Okay? And Eric mentioned this, and we should continue that, right? It is basically, it's a program that executes, but it doesn't have that context knowledge, right? And we have to remember that. It's basically executing a formula, and that formula is what you've programmed it to do, what it's learned how to do, but it may not be the right thing. Okay? Ade Oliva, who has created AI that can actually read what you are thinking, right, with brain scans. One of the smartest people I know, she says artificial intelligence should be artificial idiots. That's one way to think about this, okay? It's not intelligent, but the thing is, it can act very intelligently, and that's very useful, as long as we are careful, as long as we do it in the right way. Okay? So, the digital transformation research, this is an update. We started this in 2010. This is an update from 2021. Where can you look for opportunities, not from AI, not just from AI, but from mobile and from Internet of Things and from other technologies you're facing? 4 good areas you can look. One is creating an engaging, emotionally engaging, targeted, personalized customer experience. Number 1, right? Number 2 is operations. Not just automation, but the ability to adapt and adjust as things go on, right? That's Industry 4.0. Business models, not just being the Alibaba or the Amazon of your industry, but what can you do with information to make more low-hanging fruit, turning your products into services, these kinds of things. And what we rediscovered, we should have noted before, employee experience. Employee experience is a critical part. We know that good, satisfied employees lead to satisfied customers. We also know that if you have a bad employee experience, it's a very good indication that your systems and your processes are not running the way they should, or your incentives, right? So when you're looking for what to do with AI, it's the same way we think about any other digital transformation work. You can look in these areas. And not only in these areas, but the opportunity to go across, like Home Depot has done, like Airbus has done, okay? You'll see also that this rides on top of your systems, your data, your systems. And if that's a mess, it's hard to do this. AI actually helps a little bit with that messy data, but the better your data is, the cleaner your processes are, the better you will be. Okay? So I really think of AI as the next stage of digital transformation. The same principles apply, but there's more that you can do, and there are more powerful opportunities. And so we still need to lead this, but we need to think more and more about what we can do. Okay? So here's some things we could do with generative AI. I have designed courses over time. We're doing one in the Philippines right now, a set of courses. And instead of me standing up and putting a suit on and going in front of a camera, now we just type words in and she will say it instead. And if you don't like how she looks, somebody else that looks different will do it. And they can do it in a different language. And frankly, I can do it with a deep fake very easily. Right? I don't need to go to a studio anymore. Right? Also, any corporate literature you have can be in any language you want, instantly, with a push of a button, right? Over here, certainly coding. Many people are doing coding right now. How many of you are your programmers? Are they using copilots and things like that? Well, if they're not, it's time to start. This really does help. Now, there are questions about whether it's better for the senior people or the junior people, but there's a learning process. And it is better. It's not only better for coding, but also for enforcing standards and making documentation. People hate doing that. The computer can help them. Okay? What else is there? Well, Cresta. Cresta is a call center tool, especially for sales. And you heard some really good startups. This, in a randomized trial at MIT, they found that everybody using this tool got better. The most senior people got 14% better. The most junior people got 34% better. If you have the senior and the junior people, they raise the bar for everybody, and it moves up. What does it do? It listens to you talk, and it gives you hints while you are talking. That person is getting confused, explain the product better. Okay? That person's getting angry, try this to calm them down. Okay? And then at the end, it comes back and says, looking across what you've been doing, you don't close fast enough. Try to get to the sale faster, these kinds of things. It becomes what a good supervisor would be, but it's with you all the time. And I'm working on a project right now with the Media Lab where we are creating a personalized tutor for the programming class, the first Python class for minority institutions, minority learning institutions. The idea is if we can get people through that first class with an individualized tutor, they are on a set for a career that they never would have had possible. But people drop out of that first class because they do not have a tutor. So we're developing that right now. Okay? And then last but not least, those of you using any products, whether it's SAP or Workday or Adobe, this is being integrated into all of your products, right? So this is happening all over the place. But once again, it's not the technology, it's what do you do with the technology that makes it better. The other thing that's really important here is we talk about generative AI solutions, but most of the best solutions are a combination. Generative AI, traditional AI, boring old IT, and also people and process in there. So Lemonade, they have a very specific niche in the insurance market. They write 98% of their policies, 98% of first claim notices, and they handle 50% of claims automatically. Through this combination of different AIs and also traditional systems, what about that 50%? Well, the easy stuff, the computer does it, and the hard stuff, they give it to a person to figure out what to do. That's how their model works. Okay? And this is Cisco. This is not the technology company Cisco. This is Cisco, the food service delivery. They have one of the largest truck fleets in the world. Restaurants around the world get supplied by these. And here are all the different ways that Cisco is applying AI in what they do. Now, this is not a high-tech company. They deliver cans of stuff to restaurants. But you can see all the different things they have on the customer experience side over there and also on the back office. And when Tom Peck, when I was talking with him about what he does, all those little brains, those are opportunities where generative AI can help. You know, we think about generative AI in helping a salesperson figure out their call planning. But how about generative AI in helping you route things around a warehouse? Or we don't have this thing they want. We don't have this kind of mushroom, but this kind of mushroom will work, right? So all kinds of opportunities there. So if you ask 3 AI experts, what are the categories of AI, you will get 5 different answers. Okay? Nobody can really agree. So I'm going to give you my 4 categories. And I'm not going to tell you this is right. I'm going to tell you it's mine, okay? If that helps. So 4 categories, and this should look familiar because Eric talked about a lot of this, right? And what I want to do is walk you through these just to give you a little bit more instinct on what to do about these things, okay? So number 1, rule-based systems. Eric called it expert systems. Put a lot of if-then statements together. 1984, when I first started programming, one of my first jobs was to create an engine for a rule-based system. And like Eric said, these things don't work, right? Beyond the simplest problems. But now rules engines are better, and if you use them in the right environments, prescriptions, loan making, these kinds of things, within the limits in which they are good, they are useful. But don't try to get outside that context, okay? Then there's econometrics, which is statistics. Most of us learn in school, deep learning, generative AI. Let's walk through these things, okay? So expert systems, we talked about this. How do you program them? You talk to an expert. And the expert tries to figure it out. But there's a nice paradox, which is that we know more than we can tell. Or as Eric said, your 2-year-old understands physics, but couldn't tell you how that works, okay? And we have that problem all the time. But you have to talk to an expert. You don't need any data, the expert. The good thing is, they will give you a precise answer, and they will give you the same answer every time. But they do not adapt, right? You add a rule, things get a little tricky. Okay? So that's one thing. Econometrics, that's the next thing, right? That's statistics. Many of you probably learned statistics, you've probably forgotten much of it, but we still use this all the time, right? If you have structured data, meaning data that you can put into a spreadsheet, usually numeric data, these things work, and they work really well, okay? They're pretty cheap to program, and especially the 2-click things, right? How do we create a formula for those 2 dimensions that will help us to figure out, is it a blue thing or a green thing, okay? And they tend to be, there are false positives, there are false negatives, but they tend to be pretty good, okay? The other is looking at the trend line, looking at the regression, okay? These things actually work remarkably well with numeric data, and also things you can turn into numeric data, like, is he going to buy my product based on what I do to him, okay? You can also do multiple dimensions. Finding that trend line with 2 dimensions is easy. Try it with 100 dimensions. Okay? I have a team right now currently looking at 100 million CVs, resumes, and tracking people's careers through that 100 million resumes to try to figure out what is a more or less productive path. You're not going to do that by just looking at 2 dimensions, right? And then, of course, you don't have to just look at lines. But you do have to have an idea of what the functional form is that you're looking at. So it's often numeric. There's some things. But you can do this. It's relatively cheap. It works really well. You get precise answers. You get the same answer every time. But it has to be numeric data. Okay. Then you have deep learning. And Eric talked a lot about deep learning. This was the coolest thing ever 15 years ago. And it's still pretty darn cool. Okay? Now, the thing is, Eric also showed you there are like 50 different versions of this, right? So I'm just going to give you one archetype. This picture, do you know what that picture is? It's a neural net. But do you know what this picture mostly is? It's a thing that people use to scare you, right? It's a complicated looking thing, and there's a little bit of magic involved in there. So Eric explained this, but let me explain it also a little bit more. You're taking inputs, you're running them through a set of weighted averages, and coming out with a prediction of multiple different states at the end, okay? And it sounds very easy, but it gets beyond human capability really fast, okay? You train it with labeled data. You need to know the truth. That's why every time you log in, it says, prove you are human. Tell us where there's a car. Tell us where there's a bicycle. You are labeling data to train these things. Every time you get on social media and they do the aging challenge, show us you and show us you 20 years ago, you're creating labeled data of old and young people, right? You need that data. And then you do the outputs are repeatable, but they're in no way explainable. Our smartest people are just starting to figure out how to make this explainable, and it's going to be a little while, okay? But look, I'm going to give you an example now. An MIT, I'm going to get a little complicated on you. But I promise not too complicated. The good thing is I'm going to try to take this scary picture and make it a little bit more real. Eric started, I'll try it, and after the 2 of us, hopefully it will make sense, okay? What are those? Anybody? They're numbers. Now try to tell me, if we were to say features, right? Loops and lines and these kinds of things. Tell me the formula, to look at the number 2. How would you create the rules to decide what is a number 2? Okay? Well, it has a little loop at the top, it has a loop down here, and then the number goes down, right? That's how a 2 looks, except that no loop there, right? And there the line is going across instead of going down, right? If you were to try to program this with a bunch of features, you would probably not get very far. But 35 lines of code, 25 to 35 lines of code can do this no problem at all by doing this kind of thing. What do you do? Well, first of all, you take these 2-dimensional objects and you turn them into a 1-dimensional set of numbers. Okay? So 28 by 28 image becomes 784 pixels. Now, what you have just done is you've thrown away all the relationships between what is on top of each other. You've thrown it away, and the algorithm doesn't care. And then you put the numbers in the left-hand side, and you have random numbers here, and it spits out 10 estimates, 0 through 9. How likely is it that that is the number? Okay? And so you come through and you get this. Well, we think maybe it's a 2, a 1. We think maybe it's a 2, maybe it's a 7, okay? And some stronger or less strong estimates. And then you go back and say, hey, it's really a 9, and you go back the other way, and you turn all the knobs to make it a little bit better, okay? Now, if that bothers you, how much do you turn each knob? It should bother you, okay? Because nobody knows how much you turn each knob. But we do know if you do this 10,000 times, the knobs end up in the right place. Okay? So if it sounds like magic to you, it is magic. It's the magic of large numbers and good algorithms. Okay? And so if you're wildly uncomfortable, then you are like the rest of us. We are all wildly uncomfortable with this, but it does work. Okay? So you do that 10,000 times and it gets there. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means you've got to have labeled data. You need to know what that number really is. You need to do the reinforcement over and over again. And you need to back chain to adjust those numbers, okay? If your data is biased, let's say we have only data on men but not women. Well, then what happens when a woman comes in? Amazon found this out. They were reviewing resumes to try to figure out what resumes look like their best engineers. And they were routinely rejecting women. Why was that? None of their engineers were women. And women talk differently. Right? By the way, if you were the captain of the women's swimming team, you would never get a job. None of the men that they trained it on were ever captain of the women's swimming team, right? And also different use. So they had to go find and fix that bias. Same thing if you train on men versus women, children versus adults, different parts of the world, okay? So you got to get rid of that. You got to test that bias. You also need to make sure you actually have some kind of accuracy in your data. So that's it. No more on the neural nets. Do you understand that picture? I could test you and you would know how to say that now? Okay. Well, at least nobody can scare you anymore. All right, so then generative AI continues, and as Eric said, what they do now, not only they're using a lot of these similar algorithms, but they're also inventing. And they're saying, okay, given what you told me and everything I know, what's the next best word or pair of words to say? And then it says, okay, once I have that, given everything you told me and everything I know, plus everything I just invented, what's the next best word? What's the next best word? And it can get things very right, as you've seen. You can also get them very wrong. I first did my bio with ChatGPT, and the bio was really good. Expert on digital transformation and innovation strategy, author of 4 award-winning books, blah, blah, blah. I loved it, right? I've only written 3 books. I don't know what that 4th book is, but it wouldn't tell me, right? So you want to be careful, but the interesting thing about that is, well, I'll come back to that in a minute. It randomly generates the next. So why do you get a different answer every time? Because it is random. It's meant to be that way, okay? And you can use that. It creates new things. It doesn't just classify. It creates new, right? It can be used for good as bad. You can get some boring stuff, you can also get creative stuff, but you also get this, the hallucinations. Right? My favorite is this. This lawyer prepared all of his court documents using ChatGPT. And unfortunately, some of the cases that he cited as precedent for what he's doing were not real. That made the judge very angry. Okay? So not only did he get in trouble with the judge, but he ended up in all the business press as being the laughingstock. Don't do that, right? But here's the thing. We are so worried about these hallucinations. But how many of us know a perfect employee? People make mistakes too, right? And so the idea is not to expect a perfect answer, maybe except if your car is driving, right? But the answer is to get these things to work well and put the right controls in case they are wrong. The same thing we do with people. So why do we expect the computers to be better than people in every case? Why don't we just put the right processes in place to account for the fact that these are sometimes not right? Okay? The other things, of course, huge training data this thing needs, and huge amounts of energy. And so these are other topics we can talk about over time. So what the problem is, you got to start with the problem and then figure out the right technique. So one way to think about it is there are questions you can ask. How accurate do I have to be, and what's the cost of being wrong? Getting in a traffic accident or making a wrong medical decision, there's a big cost. Sending the wrong marketing message to somebody, no cost at all. Right? Do you need the answer to be explainable? Because if it does, then those first two are probably useful. Those last two, they're not explainable. How do you do that, right? Do you need the answers to be the same every time? You're not going to get that with generative AI, right? And confidentiality. And confidentiality is less of a problem right now. You can get these generative things that are going to keep you, or at least the vendors promise they will keep you safe, right? But these are things to think about, right? Then on the other side is the data. Do you have a source of truth, and how true is that data? And number two, is it generalizable? Or are you going to reject all women that apply for your company? Okay. So as you're thinking about how to do it, these are questions you can ask about this problem I'm trying to solve right now. Okay. And the questions, either you can make the decision, or you can ask these questions of your technical people, and first of all, they will now be a little bit afraid of you, right? But second of all, you will have a better conversation because you are asking these questions. Okay. So, first bit, what is AI? 4 things. Here's how to think about them. Here, if you like traffic lights, here's a nice little chart you can use, right, to think about these things. Where are they good and bad? But that's only part of the problem. That's the part saying, okay, I have a specific problem I want to solve. How do I think about what the right technique is? The real problem is, how do I make this work in my organization? So I have more questions for you, maybe some more answers. You ready? Okay. How do I make it work in the organization? Remember, come back to this. Technology is not the problem. Transformation is. How do we put the processes, the policies, and the capabilities in place to do this the right way? Because doing it once is hard, but you need to do it over and over, and you need to make it mix in with the rest of the stuff that you do. Okay? Here are 3 challenges to think about when you try to make this stuff work in your organization. And I'd like to say this is only Gen AI, but this is basically anything. How do we work this in, right? But with generative AI, how do we prioritize what to do and what not to do? What do we do first? What do we do second? And what do we never do? Okay? Number 2, risk management. You know, what if we are wrong? What if we have a privacy problem? These kinds of things. And last is the capabilities. So 4 sets of questions you can ask for that. And then after this, I'll have one more little section for you. Okay? How do you ensure the safety and the value of what you're doing? Okay? And one of the other ones is learning. How do you not only learn about this innovation, but how do you learn across innovations so you can choose the best way to do things and you don't end up doing the same thing 10 times? Okay? One of the big questions to think about here is how does your governance process look? And what we've seen in generative AI is multiple approaches, but they tend to fall into top-down. This is a very risky, very expensive thing. Let's control everything. Okay? And the good thing about that is we're not going to make mistakes. We're not going to throw money away. We're probably not going to kill a lot of people. Okay? But we're also not going to innovate very well, because the central part of large organizations, it doesn't always know the best opportunities. Okay? The other side is the decentralized way. Hey, go out and innovate. Do whatever you want. Okay? Now, here are some rules. You know, don't steal money. Don't be bad to people, right? But here are some rules. Innovate within these rules and tell us about what you're doing. It's a tremendously good way to discover really interesting ideas at the edges. But it's a great way to waste money also. Okay? And also, depending on how careful they're being, you can also break some laws when you do that, because where the central might try to be very careful, the edges might not. And so what we saw in generative AI is the very top-down, safe but slow, or the very decentralized, very fast but more risky and more costly. We saw both of those coming out. So at Société Générale, one of the big French banks, they did it in a very centralized way, but they asked everybody to say, if you want to do this, what would you do? And they got 700 use cases. And what they decided is they did a few of those right away, but the rest they said, wait, because all these cases, an intelligent agent is important, a chatbot to talk to people is important, programming is important. Let's do this the right way, and we will build everything on top. Okay? So they did a few things fast. They told other things to wait until they had these other capabilities set up. They tried to bridge the centralized and decentralized. Cisco, that I told you about, they did a different way. They said, you know what? This is just another technology. We have a way we think about this. And the first thing we think about is, can we buy this instead of building it? And if we can, we will do that. The second thing they say is, if we think it needs to be programmed, can we do it cheaper and easier with expert systems and statistics, or do we do the fancy, complicated stuff? And only when it answers all those questions do they do the leading edge, the generative AI. So you see these governance rules, they fit in there, right? You got to figure out what works with your company, and how does it fit the risk profile that you're thinking about. Some other questions you want to ask, though, are also just as important. Is our culture ready for this? What happens when the computer is just as smart as our expert person? 15 years ago, this started happening in banks, where the computers were as good at judging a high-quality or a low-quality loan than people were. Or insurance. The computers were just as good at underwriting some things as people. The people felt very threatened by that. And there was a whole process. It's happening in all kinds of jobs now. If you've seen the movie Moneyball, have you seen, I don't know whether, America, baseball is a big deal. I don't know if it is here. But there's a big question, right? How do I tell who is a good, potentially new employee for this company? Maybe the computer is better, and people don't like that, okay? So do we have the humility to work with these? Or do we fight against them? Okay? Do we have ethics to do the right thing and not the wrong thing? Right? And also in the culture, how good are we at experimenting and trying things and failing fast, rather than trying to have the right answer before we start? Okay? The culture's got to be ready for these things. And the way you do that, you have to drive that. You don't just say plug in the model. You got to help people get comfortable, right? With innovation units, other things. And another one also with people being comfortable. Do we have the skills? But what does this mean for careers? A friend of mine, Daniel Rock, looked at GPTs, and he has calculated through a very rigorous process that 46% of all jobs are likely to have 50% of their tasks replaced by AI over time. Now, some jobs it'll be 100%. These are just 46% of jobs will have half of their tasks go. What if you do that job? How do you feel about that? And am I going to go along with this, or am I going to reject this because I think it's going to hurt my job? So what do you do about this? Certainly, I've done some writing on this, and certainly after lunch you're going to see some really interesting stuff on that. But AI doesn't have to replace you. How can it make your job easier, reduce your cognitive load? How can it do, one of the things I do it for all the time, I'm a pretty good writer, but I don't do those sexy creative titles, so I let AI do it now. Give me 5 potential titles for this, right? Or I can give it my text and say, make this more exciting, right? And the other thing we did not expect is the ability to learn with AI. AI is a tremendous teaching tool, and I'm finding I'm learning all the time just by having it help me think, having it ask questions about what I'm doing, and certainly I talked about this tutor we were doing, and many places are doing these tutors, including at Cresta and at one of the startups we talked about, right? So it does not have to replace us. Are you having that conversation with your people about how this, you're not just saying, we're not going to hurt you, because nobody believes that, right? But can you have the conversation about how we can help you introduce this? So for example, Dentsu Creative, an advertising firm, that is a firm that you might think should be a little bit nervous about these things. And what they're finding is that these creative people love this. But they're being very systematic in the company about how they introduce this. First of all, they are saying all the boring stuff, your planning, your proposals, those kinds of things, it will do that for you. Take a few words and turn it into a proposal. That's great. What they didn't expect, and that they love now, is let's draw a picture, and instead of saying, go away and in a week we will have a design for you, now they say, go get a cup of coffee and in 5 minutes we'll have a design for you. And now we can iterate that and iterate it. You can do it with the client. It's better for both. They didn't expect that, right? The other thing they're doing, though, is they're not saying, you use it, you use it. What they're saying is, everybody use it, we will help you, and let's get together and share your ideas. What is working for you, what's not working for you? These office hours where people share their tricks. So people are investing as a group in getting better. And you see what happens. It frees up the time that creatives need to be creative. All the stuff they hate, they don't have to do. They can't see themselves going back to the old way. So what they did, they were very careful about helping people understand how this can be good for them, not just bad for them. They involved them in that process, and that's how they avoided the rejection, and they get better with this. In coding, in your marketing people, in many places, customer service, you will have this thing going on. A lot of fear. We've done a thing called the Global Opportunity Forum, where we are getting companies, talking to companies about career questions. How are you developing your people? What are skills that you need? What's the best way that you can do to help your people grow with you instead of being afraid as you grow? And so if you're interested, contact me about how we are getting companies together to think through this challenge. Okay? So that's that. You ready for the last part of this talk? We talked first of all about types of AI, 4 types. And if you have a particular problem, how do you decide on the right type? And I gave you questions you can ask. Then we talked about having your company have the capability to use this well, to transform in a better way, and questions you can ask there about culture and helping your people be ready. So we just completed a study. It's coming out tomorrow in Sloan Management Review about how are companies looking at transformation with generative AI. Okay? And we were looking for these giant transformations. Let's change the entire underwriting process in a firm. Or let's turn over all of our sales and customer service to a computer. We didn't find those. But we did find a lot of smaller transformations happening, that people are starting to get a lot of value from this and setting themselves up for the bigger transformation over time. So what we do is, if you think about the big transformations as being transformation with a big capital T, what we found is that companies are doing a lot of transformation with a little t, smaller transformations. But they're doing it in a systematic way that is helping them get ready. Okay? And it looks like this. Level 1 is most companies already are thinking about individual productivity. Here is a version of the LLM that is safe to use. Or here's our own private version. right? McKinsey, for example, now has an LLM that looks across all of their slide decks. And it's not perfect, but if you need to know about energy generation in Southeast Asia, McKinsey probably did this once before, and it can help to answer some questions for you, okay? So not only the public things, but the private things they're starting to do from the individual productivity standpoint. Very low risk. They're just informing people. It's a good way to get started. Okay? Number 2 is the specialized roles and tasks. Let's start to transform that. So we're seeing it in call centers a lot. We're seeing it in coding, we're seeing it in some other things. Typically, a human still stays in the loop, but sometimes for low-risk things, they're letting the computer take over. Okay? Like at Lemonade, right? Lemonade is 50% of things get processed automatically, 50% the more risky things they take on. And so that's starting to happen. And then what we're not seeing as much of, except in technology companies, is actually doing the direct customer impact. Okay? So how do we think about this? In the first level, individual productivity, summarize these documents. Many banks I know that the minute a company releases its financials, a minute later, 5 minutes later, all the spreadsheets are updated. You had to have a lot of interns that did that before. Now it just happens, right? These kinds of things could happen. That's the next piece. But summarizing documents, hey, what just happened at my meeting, right? And in the company-specific LLMs, the opportunities in the tasks are like that one. Can we make sense of the latest quarterly report for financials? Can we think about customer support that's human in the loop, right? They tend to be lower risk, and you keep the human in the loop to help mediate that risk even more. And last but not least, we're seeing this farther thing, the direct engagement. And we're seeing this in online right now. The people that make Coach and Kate Spade things that only this big, but they cost a lot of money, right? They're personalizing a very conversational approach to help you, just as if you went in the store and that person would make you buy that handbag that you charge too much money for. Now online, they can start to do the same thing. Relatively low risk. Those kinds of things are starting to happen. And also the idea of doing the first or second tier of customer service, and these are happening, right? The product companies are already doing it because they have to, right? What we're seeing less of is this bottom thing, transformation of large processes. What will happen from what we're hearing is that you're not going to get Gen AI replacing the whole, but combinations will do it. Gen AI will have a part. So many companies, we already have them, the forms that you give, generative AI will translate that into data that the rest of the processes can use. And then it will translate it back into conversational later. You'll see these combinations happening more and more, okay? So you want to think about the risks and the capabilities. What's happening here, we call this the risk slope. As you grow your risk management capability, but you also grow your capability to do more and more bigger things over time, okay? Here's the reason why this is so important. The proofs of concept, it's easy to do them, but making it work in a large group of users or customers, getting from the lab to reality is really hard. And in fact, in a large bank, she said, the more stuff you do, the more stuff you find to do. She did not mean more features we can build. She meant more errors we have to solve. Okay? And one way to think about it is H&M, the fashion company, it's almost like putting a tire on a car. How many of you have changed a tire on your car? Not many people. Well, if you've ever changed the tire, you know that you do not put a bolt on really hard and another one, because you will bend the tire. You'll bend the rim. Put a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. Okay? That's how you want to think about your AI capability in your companies. Do it here, learn from there for the next thing, Okay? So what's the conclusion? I just gave you a lot of stuff. But that's okay. This is MIT, right? You're smart people. Okay? AI can seem to be intelligent, but be intelligent in how you use it. But remember, just because it's not perfect, that doesn't mean it's bad. Your people also make errors. Just put the right processes, right controls to deal with the fact that people are sometimes wrong, okay? Number 2, start with the problem, not the technology, and many times the answer will be combinations, not just one of these. You look at the task that needs to be done. Number 3, get started now. Because if you're going to put that tire on your car, little bits, you work up the growth slope, the risk slope. And every time you do something, you learn more to be better at it. Okay? You got to help your people be ready. Because if they're not ready, they will fight you. And they will fight you either very actively, or more likely they'll just say, oh, that's hard. I don't know what to do, right? Those of you who have teenagers, you know they do both, right? So, and last but not least, continuously improve. What can you do with small T transformations that will help the large T transformations later on, okay? So I have exactly 10 seconds left. So I'm going to ask for questions even though I'm not allowed to. So let's take a few questions, but I won't go too far over, okay? Can we do some questions? So by the way, lots of good reading if you want it, including the new article. So thank you very much. What should we do with questions? Ah, they're up here. I don't get to choose the question. This is scary. Or is pushing everyone to use AI, even the blue-collar workers? Is this the right move? Is it necessary for everybody? The interesting thing that you said in there is they're pushing everyone. How can you encourage everyone? Do you see the difference? If I say, you have to do this, half the people are going to say, you can't tell me what to do. If you say, hey, this is a fun set of tools, let's try to help you think through it, they might be a little bit more interested. So what I suggest is encourage everybody to do it, and you might learn something. And if you encourage everybody to do it, they might actually suggest some innovations and fight this a little bit more, okay? What's another question? There we go. Many of our works revolve around achieving efficiency and optimization. When AI can do that better, what would be the focus of humans' work? So certainly we had the Work of the Future initiative. Ben's going to talk about this more also after lunch, some really fascinating things. But I'm convinced there will be plenty for people to do. And in an ideal world, you take all the boring stuff, let the computers do that, and you let the people do more interesting stuff. Now that's an ideal world, but can we get closer? If you think a way automation has worked all over time, it has always taken the routine work, but there's still been a role for humans. And when you look at the way advanced manufacturing works, you still have people in there. They're just not doing the really boring stuff anymore, right? So I think there will be a role for humans, and the tricky part is trying to figure out how to introduce the right things in the right way and to engage your people in the process. The Global Opportunity Forum we're talking about is another opportunity there. Next up, how do you balance creativity with and without AI? What are the advantages, disadvantages of flexing ideas? I don't see any disadvantage. Actually, I do see a disadvantage. I do it all the time. What are some creative ways to think about this? You can always ignore it. But what would I do without the computer? I would go to a couple friends. What's a creative way to think about this? Okay? So I don't see a problem with helping the computer be more helping. The only challenge is sometimes you start down a route and you get stuck in that route. So just as if you're talking to people, when you're talking with the computer, be ready to back out of that route and try a different thing. You know, you can get uncreative because you get stuck in a certain path. Okay? But absolutely, flex the ideas all you can. You don't have to accept those ideas. How can we prepare young people for a job 15 years from now that might not exist due to AI anymore? Hopefully, if you are training, let me say that differently. Certain people you train to do a job. Right? We have vocational training all over the place. You train them for that job because nobody should expect that you start a job now and it will be the same job in 15 years. Now, there are some, my mom was a school teacher. 15 years later, she was still a school teacher, but she was teaching differently. My uncle was a fireman. 15 years later, he was still a fireman, but there were new tools he had to learn to use. Okay? So you train people for the job if you're training them for a job, but they should also get the ability to learn. They should gain the comfort, the growth mindset to get things, and you should always train that. Okay? As far as training people for what will the good things be, creativity, working with people, critical thinking, these don't seem to be going out of style. And this generative AI stuff, those don't seem to be going out of style for a while, right? Actually, writing those emails, maybe. But knowing how to tune those emails to be the right kind of interaction with people, AI will help, but those things will happen. So what I call these human skills, and we have a framework we call the MIT, when I was in open learning, the human skills framework, right? And that framework, we think about how I think, how I work with others, how I manage myself, how I lead others. Those skills are probably not going to go away. And so how can you get those in college? How can you get those in high school? Teamwork, writing and communicating, leading things, even when you're 12 years old. Okay, I think that's the end of my time. So I want to thank you, and I'll be around at lunch if you want to talk.